Are you finding that Scrum isn't working for you? Do you constantly find that you're never quite able to complete your sprint backlog? And even when you get close, it never really feels like success. You're more of a feature factory than anything else. Well, it's almost certainly because of this one thing. What is it? Let's talk about it. I've been using Scrum with teams in a variety of organizations for the past 20 years. God, has it been that long? And when Scrum fatigue sets in, it's almost always because the team are not using a sprint and product goal, or because they're using them in the wrong way. Now, if you've really tried to use a sprint and product goal properly, but find that work that you're doing just doesn't lend itself to one, keep watching as I will cover this point later on. Now, if you don't use a sprint and product goal in the right way, you'll end up turning into Scrum butt. Why? Because you'll end up focusing on getting all the stories taken into sprint done, which is the wrong thing to focus on. Yes, look, the purpose of the sprint is not and never has been to get all the stories done. And look, things like story points and burn down charts are the wrong things to focus on. They make you chase the completion of each story taken into sprint because A, you want to get that burn down chart down to 0, and B, because you want your velocity to either hit what you said it would or do better. Now, Scrum Butt represents a diluted version that undermines the benefits of Scrum. Scrum Butt goes like this. We use Scrum, but we can't set a sensible sprint goal, so we ignore it, or create a generic goal like complete all stories, or finish testing the stories from the previous sprint. Now, if you're a Scrum Master, you really need to get to grips with this. You're the expert in Scrum, and you should know the Scrum Guide. The product and sprint goal is fundamental to Scrum. So, let's be clear. To get the benefit of Scrum, you need to be working on a single product or service. There needs to be a clear vision provided by the product owner, and from that vision, you need to have clear goals identified. Now, you work on one of these product goals at a time. And the product owner will decide when enough has been achieved against this goal in order to move on to the next goal. Product backlog should only contain work related to the goal you're working on. Each sprint is dedicated to creating value towards that product goal. And to this end, the team decide on a single sprint goal that will get them closer to realizing the product goal. Look, if you don't do this, you reduce your ability to innovate and inspect and adapt during the sprint. Now, does your sprint feel like mini waterfall? Well, look, it's because you create all the stories up front prior to sprint. You focus on getting them all done in sprint and then reflect on it at the end. Look, this is waterfall. Look, instead, Scrum teams should focus on a specific sprint goal, such as set up a deployment pipeline and release an empty site to production. And you can generate a few stories prior to sprint start, but don't try to create them all. Then work on the goal as a team. Discover what is needed to achieve the goal. It does not matter if you complete all the stories you took into sprint. The only thing that matters is achieving the sprint goal, getting it done and adding incremental value to the product goal. Look, it's one of the many reasons I believe there's no value in story points or burn down charts. In fact, it's worse than that. These things are a total waste of your time. Now, in my humble opinion, if you want to have metrics that actually have any value, then you should use flow metrics. Check the description below for videos on what they are and how to start. Now, look, if you don't use a sprint goal, the first thing that usually happens is that it causes a lack of alignment against the product backlog. Yeah, teams take items into sprint from the backlog, but the set that they choose don't make sense together. The next issue is that the team ends up not working as a team. They end up working in silos, one of the very things Scrum is designed to stop. And this happens because the individual team members work on single items by themselves because there's no shared goal to bring them together. And the items they're working on don't relate to each other, so essentially it's mini waterfall. Next, it leads to a lack of focus and causes the daily Scrum to just be a status update. I'm sure you've been there before. Now look, because everyone is working on separate items, it's not possible to talk about progress towards a single defined valuable increment because there isn't one. The daily Scrum should be all about progress towards the sprint goal. Does anything need to change? Also makes it more difficult to define the roadmap for the product, and it makes it harder to engage with stakeholders as they simply can't see the value in the sprint as a whole. And it can make the sprint review session difficult or even pointless. Another side effect of not having a single sprint goal is that it increases the team's work in progress and context switching, which results in reduced morale, lower quality work overall, and of course increases the time to deliver. And sprint planning is made much more painful and takes longer because you end up talking about a lot of different pieces of work not aligned to a shared goal. Plus, you end up following a plan instead of responding to change. Come on. Look, it's very hard to respond to change when you've got a lot of unrelated work. But if you've got a single shared goal, it is much easier. It reduces innovation, inspect and adapt element, empiricism. It's just reduced to the retro. Look, this is not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to work together on this problem during the sprint. So, if you're not using a sprint goal and have been thinking that this is fine, I'd suggest that you sit down as a team and have a chat about it. Now, I mentioned earlier that if you've already tried to use a sprint and product goal, but the work you're doing just doesn't lend itself to one, then I'd have some pointers for you. And here it is. You should stop using Scrum. Yes, stop using Scrum. You almost certainly don't have a single product or service and very likely have multiple product owners. So your backlog reflects a load of unrelated things. Trying to crowbar what you're doing into Scrum is likely causing misery, so stop it. Scrum is the wrong framework for you. Look, instead use Kanban. You'll find it works much better. You're just using the language of Scrum, but for no benefit. Look, the sprint and product goal is so fundamental to Scrum that there's little to no benefit without them. Simply not designed for your scenario. Now, using Kanban doesn't mean you have to abandon planning, retros, or even the Scrum Master role. You can still use them, but probably reduce the cadence of the daily meetups. Look, I'd urge you to think about this seriously if you find yourself in this scenario and start to make some changes. You'll be a lot better off. Now, another major anti-pattern that results in low or no delivery is when you don't focus and work with the customer. Now, check this video out to see why and what you can do about it. Okay, that is it for this one. Stay safe, stay humble, and I will see you next Thursday for another Agile Thought.